Atomstack gave me one of their new Maker A30 Pros to test out and see how I like it. This is their newest diode laser model, and I'll put all the technical specs and some links in the description. This video is going to be about half review, half how-to. If you're brand new to diode lasers or laser engravers in general, I'd encourage you to watch my beginner laser engraving video, link in the upper right hand corner. When you get a new laser, one of the first things I'd recommend doing is a laser power test. This will show what the laser will do with whatever type of material you're engraving on at different speeds with different power. In the past I showed this with a test pattern that I had purchased, but it turns out Lightburn has this capability built in. To do this, you go to the Laser Tools menu dropdown and select Material Test. Here you can set your minimum and maximum speeds for the test as well as how many squares you would like in the grid. Once you get everything set the way you want it, go ahead and click Frame and you'll see where the laser will move over your test material. This looked like it was going to be a little small to me, so I increased the size of my test squares from 5mm squared to 10. I also checked the preview to see what the test pattern would look like. With that being good, I checked the framing one last time. Now I was ready to run the test, so I clicked Start. I'm going to take this moment to mention that anytime I'm running any kind of engraving or cutting on this machine in this video, the air assist is on. Unsurprisingly, the A30 was a lot more powerful than the lasers I've used in my past few videos. My biggest takeaway from this test is I probably never need to exceed 50% when engraving wood. Next I did some cutting tests on 1.5mm plywood. I did this to test the best speed to power ratio to produce the cleanest cuts with the lowest laser power. To get a true sense of the A30, I wanted to do a real project, so I selected a topographical map. I purchased the SVG files for Puget Sound on Etsy and I imported them into Lightburn. There's 7 layers to this map and each one of them needed a little bit of tweaking before I sent them to the laser. I had to enlarge all of them to the maximum size I could get, not based on how big the laser was, but how wide my material was. I also ungrouped everything because certain things I'd want to set to fill rather than line, like text. I carefully went through the map and assigned all the place names and road numbers to a single layer. In the end, the top piece of this map had 3 different layers. The names were all set to fill, where things like streets were set as lines. I adjusted the speed and power settings so that these first 2 layers would come through as engravings, whereas the last one would be solid cuts because the land masses would need to be removed. I say land masses, but on this map it's actually the waterways that get removed. I went on to do the other 6 layers, and in each one of these I added a little number in the corner that would be covered up by the top layer so that I wouldn't get them mixed up. This isn't anything you have to do, but if you want, you can right-click on the grid, go to Preview, and watch an animation of how the laser is going to track over your workpiece. Now I'm going to show you a kind of cool feature in Lightburn that really helps with framing when you don't have a lot of excess material to work with. Under the Edit drop-down menu, go to Device Settings. Find the Enable Laser Fire button and turn it on if it isn't already. Next, you'll need to restart Lightburn so that the setting takes. When you have Lightburn open again, click on the Move button. Next, you'll make sure that Fire is selected and set the power to something really low, like 1 to 5% max. Next, we'll do the framing, but before you do, press and hold the Shift key on your keyboard. When you click Frame, you'll see the laser come on at a very low power, showing you exactly where the beam will go. This is really useful, especially in a project like this where I only had a few millimeters on each side of the plywood to play with. We'll give you a heads up though, the A30 was powerful enough that even at 5% it took paint off metal. So with the framing good, I went ahead and started engraving and cutting the top layer of the map. The biggest challenge at this stage is making sure you don't lose anything like small islands that fall through into the honeycomb surface of the cutting panel. This is the method I came up with to try and make sure I didn't lose any important pieces of land. Tweezers are definitely helpful when you're trying to put all those tiny islands back where they came from. I used masking paper to make sure nothing got lost while I was cutting the next layers. This worked really well to make sure everything stayed together for the next few steps. Now, it's a lot easier to do this if you use thicker plywood like 3mm. It makes it harder for those small pieces to fall out. However, with that being said, the finished product looks a lot nicer with the thinner 1.5mm thick plywood. I sanded the top with some 325 grit sandpaper just to remove any smoke residue. I hit the tops with some clear coat, but this is a step that could just as easily wait till the end. I used varying shades of blue acrylic paint to give each of the water layers some depth. I didn't do this particularly neatly, I just wanted to make sure that all the edges would have the right amount of color showing. I didn't want the paint too opaque, so before it dried I wiped everything down with a paper towel. This eliminated any brush strokes and allowed the faintest amount of grain to show through. I did go back and redo some of these because a few of the colors were just off. Once all the paint had dried, I removed the masking paper and discarded all the pieces that would create the depths of Puget Sound. I used super glue so I could laminate all these layers together. The lower 3 or 4 layers of this map went really simply because none of them had islands. Where there were islands, I used some of the excess to mark out where the actual piece needed to go so I wouldn't have anything come off too far. Then it was a couple drops of super glue in the tweezers to get everything put in the right spot. Aside from the air assist on the A30, taking the time to really dial in the power and speed helped a lot on this project because none of the pieces were sooty or left any kind of mark on anything. This is vastly different than the laser cut advent calendar project I did last year, link in the upper right hand corner. When I did this project, I did not take the time to really dial everything in, and as a result, a lot of the pieces were very dirty and necessitated paint. Off camera, I also made some frames and cut some glass to finish this project off right. I'm pretty happy with how these came out, and it gave me a really good sense of working with the A30. Before a final verdict, here's a few other things I tried. While the 30-watt laser would take paint off brass just fine, I really wasn't too surprised to see it barely mark the surface at all. Unsurprisingly, it engraved stainless steel like a champ. Somewhat surprisingly, at least to me, I was able to engrave mild steel with no problems. And this is proper engraving too, not just discoloration. This was just a rough test that I didn't spend a lot of time setting it up on, but it engraved glass just fine. What I really started to notice the longer I used the A30 was just how precise the laser was. Its 0.01mm beam diameter really allowed for some very clear engravings. Though I do need to learn more about the settings in Lightburn to maximize this potential. Alright, now so I'm just going to give you an overview of the machine and what I really liked about it. This right here seems like a small thing, but the height adjustment for the laser just sits there, and the way it sits, it doesn't go anywhere. It stays right where it is, and it's easy to get off. With my last laser, I found a lot of times I would misplace the stop block that was used to set the laser height. I really like that Atomstack designed one right there. On that note, how the height adjustment on this laser works is pretty slick. Having the knob right there, easy to turn, riding on this track, made for very easy height adjustment. Now, I didn't go over this, but you can run this off a TIFF card. It has a little offline controller. I didn't really play around with it a whole lot because I always have my laptop plugged right in to run it off Lightburn. But I did find it'll run just fine if this is removed, so you don't necessarily have to worry about this snagging on anything or falling off. I do like the nice stop button that's big. Has a quick reset here. You don't have to turn power off to do a reset. And it does have a flame sensor buried down there. My only real complaint of this machine is I think the legs are a little too short. Granted, maybe my cutting panel is just too big, but I found unless I propped it up on these wheels would hit the cutting panel. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having an oversized cutting panel. I like that the back rail is wide enough to fully accommodate the clamp for the AC1 camera. That's pretty cool. When I tried the AC1 camera in my last video, and I'll put a link in the description for how to set that up, I found that it worked fine clipped to the back of the longer rail on the Ray 5 machine, but because the Ray 5's back rail was just a little narrower, the clamp did stick off a bit, and in extremely high movements of the laser up here, it would bump into it. I also like that this kit comes with the air assist. It's not like an extra thing that you have to buy. That's pretty cool. Granted, 30-watt laser, you really need to have one, but that they included it, I enjoy that. So I didn't include a lot of cutting tests because, to be honest, a diode laser is really much better for engraving than cutting, although obviously with thinner pieces of plywood, it works just fine. And this A30 definitely was powerful enough to engrave lots of different materials. Overall, I really like the A30. It worked great right out of the box. It was easy to assemble, very powerful, super simple to use, very precise, didn't take any real physical adjustments to the machine, just a little tweaking and light burn. Great product, love it.